nearly 2,000 years, thoughtful men and women, both Christians and non-Christians, have been drawn to the image of the dying Jesus on a cross. The passion of Jesus, which means the suffering and death by crucifixion, has been the focus of countless works of famous art through the centuries. It's been a topic of best-selling books and also great musical masterpieces like Handel's Messiah. In the year 1206, Francis of Assisi in Italy began a journey of conversion, and there was a cross that would play a special role in the life of this young man. Francis was the son of a wealthy cloth merchant, and Francis possessed a rather witty brain. He had a sharp intellect, and he was a joyful, free spirit, and Francis was known to be the life of the party, often at nights on the streets of Assisi. Francis always had a heart for the poor. He was always getting food from the family table and money to the poor on the streets of Assisi. At the age of 20, Francis enlisted in the militia with the citizens of Assisi because there was a battle with the neighboring hill town of Perugia. And Assisi was defeated, and Francis was taken prisoner and jailed in Perugia. During the year that Francis was in prison, he became quite ill. It was a turning point for him. He did a lot of thinking. His father, being wealthy enough to offer ransom, was able to get Francis back home after a year in Perugia in prison. But Francis, it took some time, and his body healed, but not his spirit. Francis was crushed emotionally. He was weak and he was anxious. Francis, during this time, began an inward spiritual search. And so Francis would go on the outskirts of Assisi and find some rather out-of-the-way spots to pray and meditate and to be alone with God. One of those places was a little church called San Damiano, which is about 2 miles straight down a path outside the walls of Assisi. It's a beautiful church. This is a view of it today. The old chapel was in really, really poor condition. And inside this beautiful chapel, mud floors and very rudimentary wooden seats. Inside was a beautiful crucifix that Francis loved to sit and pray. One day, Francis was kneeling before this cross in that old chapel of San Damiano, and he heard a voice, and that voice says, "Go, Francis, and repair my church." Was it the voice of Christ? Was it the voice of Francis internally? Who knows? But Francis had no doubt who it was that spoke to him, and so immediately Francis looked for ways to repair this old chapel and to help the priest that he loved to talk to. From that moment that Francis heard that voice before this cross, Francis of Assisi began a spiritual journey that changed not only his life, but transformed the life of millions of people around the world. And Francis became one of the greatest saints that the church has ever known, and is still one of the most popular saints in the church today. especially because of his love for nature and creation. This cross is called the San Damiano crucifix, and it's today preserved in the Basilica of St. Clare, a beautiful new church in Assisi. What draws us to a cross? Crosses are displayed prominently in churches, on communion tables, sometimes in stained glass. We sing hymns about crosses. Think about it. We're in the season of Lent. Beneath the cross of Jesus, when I survey the wondrous cross, in the cross of Christ I glory. What makes us sing songs about a cross, about a horrible method of torture and death? We wear crosses around our necks. We have them on our clay tokens that we wear in our pockets during this season of Lent. Crosses are displayed on walls in our homes and on walls in our hospitals. They dangle from our ears and from the rearview mirrors of our cars. And crosses are displayed as tattoos on our bodies. Look at the sports players that you see on TV or other people on the streets. What draws us to a cross? John chapter 12, verse 32 records Jesus saying, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." Now, Jesus doesn't say anything about a cross, okay? He says, "I will draw people to myself." Not to a cross, but to myself. And Jesus was absolutely right. Absolutely right. But what draws us to him and the cross upon which he died. As we look a little bit at today's passage in John chapter 12, verses 20 through 33, we see that Jesus is moving closer to his death in Jerusalem, and that's why this text is a part of our scripture on the fifth Sunday of Lent. We only have 2 weeks before Easter, and next week is Passion Palm Sunday. So the Passover celebration in Jerusalem is happening in this text, and it proves to be a real pivotal moment in the life of Jesus. In verse 20 of chapter 12, John informs us that some Greeks have also made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the festival of liberation. Liberation of the Jewish people from exile, first from Pharaoh in Egypt, then from King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon in 586, and then from Caesar and the Roman Empire 500 years later in the time of Jesus. Greeks. Why does John put Greeks in this story? It's a Jewish festival, Passover. Well, many Greeks from the Mediterranean world would make the journey to Jerusalem. Those who were drawn to the Jewish religion, maybe those who were drawn to Jesus who were not yet Jews, but Greek Gentiles. But in John's understanding, there is symbolism between the drawing of both Greeks and Jews. Because that is a symbol that the new age has begun. That Greeks and Jews are both given the promise of salvation, that no one in the world is excluded, because there was no other people in the world except Gentiles or Greeks and Jews. And Jesus' death is going to give salvation an entirely new meaning. Jesus goes on to give an agricultural metaphor about a grain of wheat falling to the earth. It's meaning that Jesus' death is not going to entail this universal faith that people understood, that when one died, we go down into the earth. No, Jesus is lifted up, as Scripture says. That's resurrection, being lifted up. Death as the end, death as extinction, will give way to death as resurrection, which means life in the process of transformation. So isn't that a better understanding? That when one's life comes to an end, we don't go down into the ground, but we are lifted up and we begin this new process of transformation, which the church says is resurrection. New life. Continued life. And there are some people, some scientists in the world today that are giving that whole understanding new meaning. John wrote his gospel as testimony. John wrote his gospel as testimony that the giving of Jesus' life is life-giving because of it. As a result of it, there is a new community that's formed. And that community is church that in John's day is both Jews and Gentiles, Greeks. And both Jews and Greeks will manifest the work of Jesus Christ throughout the world. So back to the question. What draws you to Jesus? I hope that you will walk with that question through the days of this week. What draws you to Jesus? There's something uniquely special about this man that drew people to him, disciples and other people who followed, people whose lives he touched. And church, we embody that presence. We embody the very presence of Jesus, His Spirit, His life. And there's something that can draw people to us because as people look at us, church, they experience and see, or they should experience and see the face of Christ. And so when they look at us, then, what should they see? What should they see? That's the tough part. That's the tough part for you and me. Because if we embody the life of Jesus, we embody hope and honesty. We embody a place such as this where people can come and learn and wrestle with the hard questions of life. When we embody the presence of Jesus, we embody hospitality and healing and kindness and acceptance and compassion. We embody a place where people can come to feel loved and cared for and fed. We embody a place where we imagine new possibilities for our world and where we can transform life in our community into a kind of life that is life-giving for all. We embody a community that values me for who I am and the gifts I have to offer and the contributions that I have to give to the world, no matter how small or large those contributions are. It's tough work, isn't it? When we lift Jesus up in our lives, when we model the compassion of Christ, when we feel His power working in us to heal and transform the lives of people who are broken, when we offer His forgiveness, His mercy, and His peace, when we try and describe and live out the alternative vision of how community should work, that's when people will be drawn to us through Christ. And church, that is entirely the reason we are in this. We offer you an invitation to become a part of the community of Christ here in the Bethany community as we seek to model the life of Christ to others who come into our midst.